A Democratic lawmaker who voted in support of Washington's new income tax is speaking out about this week's revelations of emails that show coordination between the Office of Attorney General Nick Brown and crafters of the legislation for a millionaire's tax, Senate Bill 6346. Now, as reported by the Center Square, those documents show efforts to basically skirt a vote of the people and to push the issue before the state Supreme Court in hopes of overturning more than 90 years of legal precedents. Representative Larry Springer is the representative I am speaking with, and you're going to see that conversation in just a moment. You may recall he supported the bill as passed, but he was also the first lawmaker to speak out while it was being debated during the legislative session to basically come out and say, there's no way that this is going to be just a tax on millionaires. He received a lot of pushback for that. In fact, in our conversation that we had Thursday night, he told me, I've still got the scars to prove that I was the first to come out on this. He took a lot of heat, but he stands by what he said then and now, that this eventually will be a tax on all income earners in the state of Washington.
I think that probably is. There's two things that, well, there's more than two things that work, but two that come to mind is, first of all, any given legislature that passes legislation cannot bind the next legislature. They can do whatever they want. No matter what we say about it shall only be on incomes over $1 million, the next legislature can change that pretty easily. So just from the pure process of legislators being convened, there's never going to be a guarantee. That said, we have talked about an income tax as a much more progressive, fair way of taxing, raising revenue in this state for, well, literally for 30, 40 years. And I happen to believe that an income tax is a more fair, equitable, progressive tax. So if you believe that, then a progressive income tax, you can't call it progressive if it only applies to, some small class of people. That's not progressive, that's regressive. And so the notion that this could be expanded to others, there's, the precedent at the federal income tax level, there are thresholds, and they just, they're lowered, raised as the legislatures deem fit. But what I hope happens as a result of this is that we take a really careful look at the two most regressive taxes we have, sales tax and the B&O tax. And in both of those cases, we at least gestured that we need to deal with those. That's what I requested specifically to support an income tax, a millionaire's income tax, is that there be a reduction in the B&O tax. There has been one. It's not as big as I would like, but it was a step in the right direction. And that there be a reduction in the sales tax. We did that as well. Again, not as much as I would like, but it was a step in the right direction. So I think we have set the stage for a robust conversation about the degree to which our revenue should be based, at least in part, on an income tax and less so on B&O and sales.
Now, Representative Springer owned a small business, a wine shop in downtown Kirkland, until he and his wife sold that business off a couple of years ago. But he says he still has major concerns about the impact of the income tax on small business owners. He told me he pushed for some changes before the bill was finally adopted with majority leaders. He said he hoped to have like a 5-year rolling average of income earnings for small businesses, such that you could take a couple of years of losses and then you have a good year. He said that shouldn't come back to bite you. You should be able to roll that over. A couple of bad years, now I've got a good year. Doesn't mean I'm a millionaire this year, right? And shouldn't have to pay into the new millionaire's tax. But that was to no avail.
That's one of my major concerns, actually, that was not adequately addressed. One, because I've had my own business for 42 years, and it was an S corporation, so I have pass-through income that shows up on my income tax every year. We frankly, we sold the business 2 years ago, so I don't anymore. But for those 40 years, there was a line on my income tax return that said net profit, net income, or net loss. Um, and one of the things that I argued about, and I hope the legislature will take into consideration if they, um, however, this is the Supreme Court determines its legality, is the notion that if you are going to include pass-through income from an S corporation, for example, that income should be subject to deductions for the cost of business. So if I'm going to be taxed on the profit that my store made, I get to subtract the cost of all the wine I had to buy before I could sell it. So, that's the way the federal code is written. So hopefully, that will be something that the future legislature will take into consideration because it's a big deal. Um, and I am sympathetic. I'm not sure exactly know how to deal with you have 2 or 3 bad years and then you have a really good year and you get dinged. We tried doing a look back of, I think it started out at 5 years, do a 5-year rolling average.
Yeah.
Um, I would support that. I think that's a really good idea. Um, it had too big a fiscal impact for some of my colleagues to withstand, so they didn't accept it.
Larry Springer told me he did support alternate legislation to require a vote of the people to have a say in this, to amend the Constitution. Otherwise, you shouldn't be able to just pass this unconstitutional income tax. There was alternative legislation offered by Representative Amy Wallen. He said he would have supported that. That never got a hearing. The majority would not hear that, he said. Now, he is not seeking reelection. Representative Larry Springer is not seeking reelection. That may be why he's more than willing to talk to us on the record. As I mentioned, we have reached out to many Democrats this week asking for comments since these documents came out from the AG's office showing this, correlation between how they were responding to sponsors of the income tax. He was, again, the only one who's been willing to speak with us on the record. But one other note I wanted to bring to your attention, and we'll put up a graphic here. There was an article this week from GeekWire. In fact, it was just yesterday from Nick Hanauer, Seattle entrepreneur, Democrat, venture capitalist, founder of Civic Ventures. He was responding to another op-ed this week, and he wrote this on GeekWire. We'll put this up. Recent efforts to make Washington the least attractive place in the country for wealthy citizens are producing a stampede to other states. Virtually every wealthy friend I have has either left or is planning to. It is a catastrophe. That from Nick Hanauer. Of course, he's sponsored many Democrat candidates' campaign efforts. And so this is a pretty remarkable thing. You may recall that Brian Haywood, during his testimony against the millionaires tax in Olympia this session, brought up Nick Hanauer and said, guys like him are leaving. There was a lot of pushback saying he's not going anywhere. So him coming out with this op-ed in Geek Wire this week is confirmation that Haywood was right and that, wealthy entrepreneurs like Nick Hanauer may in fact be leaving the state, and this income tax might be the final straw.